For generations, John Deere stood as the cornerstone of American farming. Its iconic green tractors weren't just machines. They were symbols of trust, productivity, and prosperity for rural communities. Farmers relied on Deere to drive their livelihoods and power a multi-billion-dollar agricultural economy. But that legacy is now in jeopardy. Confidence in John Deere is crumbling. Mass layoffs, offshoring, equipment prices that have soared beyond affordability. An escalating farming crisis is now threatening the entire $34.05 billion agricultural sector. Farmers are pushing back hard, and the future of U.S. agriculture could be hanging by a thread. This goes far beyond machinery. It's about economic survival. What started in small farming towns is rippling into global trade markets. John Deere's most controversial decisions to date are triggering seismic shifts that could redefine farming in America. In this video, we're diving into why John Deere is cutting U.S. jobs and shifting manufacturing to Mexico, how restrictive repair rules are alienating farmers, the fall of crop prices, and China's involvement, Trump's explosive reaction, and the political firestorm around U.S. manufacturing with rural America on edge. The consequences couldn't be more serious. Will John Deere's strategy blow up in its face? Or is this just the harsh new reality of American agriculture? Share your opinion in the comments. What's really going on? John Deere has been more than just a brand. It was the lifeblood of U.S. farming for nearly 200 years. Its machines helped shape the agricultural landscape, and for many, owning a Deere was part of achieving the American farm dream. Built on a reputation for quality, dependability, and progress, Deere became an institution. But now that dream is unraveling. The company once seen as invincible is now in the eye of a storm. With declining demand, frustrated customers, and a broader economic slowdown, Deere is facing a reckoning unlike anything in its history. The statistics paint a troubling picture. America's $34 billion agricultural industry is being crushed by falling commodity prices, rising input costs, and disruptive global trade changes. And the brand farmers once counted on is now struggling to hold on. How did this happen? It started with waves of layoffs, and the shockwaves were immediate and far-reaching. The layoffs that rocked rural America. John Deere has long been a major employer in farming regions, providing stable jobs to tens of thousands of American workers. But with sales declining, the company has slashed its workforce, cutting over 4,500 jobs since 2015. Just this year, nearly 200 factory workers in Iowa lost their positions due to reduced production. In towns where John Deere is often the economic anchor, these layoffs have been devastating. Families who've relied on Deere paycheck for generations are now left scrambling. Local businesses dependent on worker spending are also struggling to survive. But this isn't just about jobs, it's about a deeper shift. Farmers are no longer buying. Equipment sales are dropping fast as crop prices fall and operational costs rise. Farmers are delaying purchases or canceling them altogether, choking Deere's revenue and triggering a cascade of production cuts and layoffs. The fallout is hitting small-town America the hardest. These communities are being hollowed out, not just economically, but culturally. When Deere pulls back, it doesn't just affect workers. It threatens entire towns built around its factories. Why farmers are walking away? John Deere used to be the premium choice, trusted for performance and durability. Farmers paid top dollar because they believed in the product. But today, that trust is eroding quickly. One of the biggest frustrations? Deere's strict repair policies. Farmers are livid that they can't fix their own equipment without navigating a maze of proprietary software and expensive service requirements. This lack of control is driving many to seek alternatives, brands that don't lock them out of their own machinery. The company has secured its equipment with digital restrictions, blocking independent mechanics and farmers from performing even simple repairs without paying steep fees. This has fueled the growing right-to-repair movement, with farmers nationwide demanding the freedom to fix their own machines without relying solely on Deere's authorized service providers. The backlash has been so strong that several states have enacted laws forcing John Deere to ease its repair limitations. However, for many farmers, these changes come too late. Frustrated, many farmers are actively exploring alternatives to John Deere. Brands like Kubota, AGCO, and Case IH are gaining popularity by offering equipment that is easier to repair and competitively priced. Some farmers are even turning to smaller, lesser-known brands or imported machines from countries like China, a market Deere once dominated. Deere's resistance to meet farmer demands is driving away loyal customers. With the company already facing financial troubles, losing even a small portion of its customer base could have devastating consequences. Meanwhile, worsening global economic conditions are compounding Deere's difficulties. The perfect storm. John Deere's troubles extend beyond poor business choices. A major economic transformation is reshaping agriculture globally, hitting American farmers, and Deere particularly hard. One major factor is the collapse in U.S. crop prices. Since 2022, corn prices have dropped 37%, soybeans 24%, and wheat 35%. This drop devastates farmers, as lower crop prices mean smaller profits, making it tough to justify costly investments in new machinery. Additionally, China, once expected to become a major importer of American farm products, has instead invested heavily in its own agricultural sector, dramatically increasing domestic production. This shift reduced China's reliance on U.S. exports, delivering another financial blow to American farmers. The global economic downturn worsens the situation further. Inflation has increased the cost of essentials like diesel and fertilizer, while high interest rates have made borrowing more expensive, making it nearly impossible for struggling farmers to secure loans for equipment. These combined pressures have created a perfect storm, severely damaging American agriculture. And John Deere is caught in the middle. In an attempt to weather this crisis, John Deere made a controversial move that sparked outrage nationwide. John Deere's bold move, shifting jobs to Mexico. When John Deere announced plans to relocate part of its manufacturing to Mexico, the reaction was swift and fierce. Farmers, workers, and politicians across the U.S. saw this as a betrayal, prioritizing corporate profits over American jobs. Deere justified the move as a cost-cutting measure to stay competitive, stating that shifting some production tasks, like cab assembly, to Mexico would help streamline operations. By keeping high-value manufacturing in the U.S. while outsourcing lower-skill work, Deere aimed to reduce costs without fully abandoning American production. On paper, this made sense. Mexico offers cheaper labor, lower operating expenses, and favorable trade terms. Deere hoped this strategy would allow reinvestment in innovation and long-term profitability. But for American workers, many of whom had already suffered layoffs, this felt like a slap in the face. Instead of rebuilding jobs domestically, Deere was choosing to move them out of the country. Many viewed this as a betrayal. Deere underestimated the backlash, which quickly ignited one of the largest political controversies in recent memory. Donald Trump's furious response. Former President Donald Trump, known for his tough stance on trade and manufacturing, condemned Deere's decision as a direct attack on U.S. jobs. At a campaign rally, he retaliated with a strong threat, imposing a 200% tariff on John Deere imports if the company proceeded with moving production to Mexico. This was more than political rhetoric. It was a serious economic warning. Trump had previously used tariffs to pressure companies into keeping jobs in America. His administration's tariffs on Chinese goods had altered global trade, and his threats had successfully deterred some automakers from outsourcing production. Now, he was applying the same pressure on John Deere. Trump's threat was straightforward. If John Deere moved manufacturing to Mexico, the company would face heavy tariffs when trying to sell those products back in the U.S. A 200% tariff would make it nearly impossible for Deere to profit on those imports, forcing the company to reconsider its plan. This announcement caused immediate turmoil in the industry. Investors panicked, and Deere stock dropped over 1.5% in after-hours trading. Analysts warned that such tariffs could disrupt Deere's supply chain and potentially lead to more layoffs. The big question was whether Deere would back down or press ahead despite the risks. But it wasn't just political leaders reacting. Workers and farmers were about to take action themselves. Protests and boycotts from many American farmers. Deere's decision to move jobs to Mexico felt deeply personal. For decades, the company symbolized the strength of American farming and was closely tied to the well-being of rural communities. Now, many of those communities felt betrayed. Farmers began organizing protests and boycotts across the Midwest, holding rallies outside Deere dealerships and demanding a reversal. Some stopped buying Deere equipment entirely, turning instead to competitors like Kubota, Case IH, and AGCO, seeking alternatives from a company they felt had abandoned them. Even Deere's own workers joined the protests, worried that continued outsourcing would cost more jobs. For longtime factory employees, watching jobs move abroad felt like a slow loss of their livelihoods. This public pressure put Deere in a difficult spot. Already struggling with falling sales and rising costs, could the company afford to alienate its core customers? Meanwhile, another challenge loomed that could change farming's future entirely. The rise of China. For many years, the U.S. led global agriculture, feeding not just Americans, but much of the world through massive exports of crops and equipment. But that dominance is eroding, with China leading the shift. Once expected to rely heavily on imports, China has dramatically boosted its own agricultural production through government investment, technology, and smart policies. This transformation includes rapidly expanding farm equipment manufacturing, where farmers worldwide once turned to brands like John Deere, Case IH, and New Holland for trusted machinery. Chinese companies now offer tractors, harvesters, and precision tools at a fraction of the price. Manufacturers like YTO Group and Zoomlion have aggressively grown their market share. Their equipment may lack John Deere's long-standing reputation, but costs much less, sometimes half the price. For farmers on tight budgets, these affordable options are hard to ignore. In regions like Africa, South America, and parts of Europe, Chinese-made farm machinery is gaining popularity. Many developing countries that used to rely on American exports are increasingly choosing China's cheaper alternatives. This shift poses a serious threat to John Deere's global standing. If farmers worldwide start abandoning American-made equipment, Deere's future as an industry leader is at risk. But China's influence extends beyond equipment. Its growing dominance in crop production is reshaping global markets. Falling crop prices. American farmers face harsh economic realities as crop prices continue to fall. Many blame China's increased agricultural output for saturating the market. Since 2022, corn prices have dropped more than 37%, with wheat and soybeans also experiencing steep declines, making it much harder for farmers to make a profit. China's agricultural growth and its impact. A major reason for falling crop prices is China's rapid expansion of its own crop production. For years, many assumed China's growing population and urbanization would make it a huge importer of American agricultural goods. The U.S., as a top food exporter, was expected to benefit from China's demand for decades. But instead of increasing imports, China invested heavily in its own farming, expanding irrigation, developing high-yield crops, and adopting modern techniques. This boost in domestic production means China is importing less from the U.S., contributing to an oversupply and driving prices down. This price drop is hurting American farmers, who are struggling to stay afloat. Lower incomes mean less spending on equipment, which further hurts companies like John Deere. For decades, farmers believed China would remain a reliable export market. But now the U.S. agriculture industry must scramble for new buyers and solutions. The robot revolution. While Deere faces declining sales and foreign competition, automation is revolutionizing farming. Autonomous tractors, robotic harvesters, and AI-powered tools are transforming how crops are grown and harvested. John Deere has invested billions in developing self-driving tractors and AI-driven systems. Their newest autonomous tractor can plow, plant, and spray crops 24/7 using GPS and sensors, promising huge cost savings for farmers by reducing labor needs. However, this technology raises difficult questions. What happens to farm workers replaced by machines? How can small farms compete with large operations that afford these machines? Currently, only large farms can buy autonomous equipment. Smaller farms struggle to afford even traditional tractors. This creates a growing divide in agriculture. Large corporate farms pull ahead while family farms fall behind. Deere's heavy bet on automation could backfire if most customers cannot afford the new technology. The immigration crisis. Another looming threat to U.S. farming is immigration policy. Over 70% of U.S. farm workers are immigrants, performing demanding field labor many Americans avoid. Farming has long depended on immigrant labor to keep costs down and harvest crops on time. Former President Trump's recent crackdown on undocumented workers threatens to drastically reduce this labor force. When similar policies were enforced in 2018, farms in states like California and Florida struggled to find workers, leading to unharvested, rotting crops. If stricter immigration enforcement returns, it could cause a severe labor shortage and crisis across American agriculture. Rising costs and the labor crisis, the situation worsens without immigrant labor. Farm costs will soar. If farms must hire fewer workers but pay much higher wages, food prices will rise dramatically. At a time when crop prices are already falling and farmers are struggling, this extra financial strain could push many small farms out of business. For John Deere, this creates another challenge. If farmers cannot afford workers to operate their equipment, why would they invest in new tractors and machines? The ripple effects of Trump's immigration policies could shake the entire farming industry, raising food prices, worsening labor shortages, and making survival even harder for struggling farms. The biggest question remains, can John Deere and American agriculture as a whole survive these mounting challenges? The vanishing backbone of American agriculture for generations, small family farms have been the backbone of American agriculture. Today, however, they're fighting to survive in an industry increasingly dominated by corporate farming, falling prices, and rising costs. The numbers tell a bleak story. Over the past 40 years, the U.S. has lost more than half of its small farms. Those that remain operate on razor-thin margins, barely breaking even. One of their biggest hurdles is access to capital and technology. Large agribusinesses can afford new machinery, automation, and precision farming tools, but small farms often lack the funds to invest in these advances. This creates a growing divide. Big corporate farms get bigger and more efficient, while small farms struggle to keep up. Government subsidies tend to favor large-scale operations as well. Federal programs are often designed to benefit major agribusinesses, providing little support to small, independent farmers. Family farms find themselves competing against multinational corporations that can buy land, invest in cutting-edge technology, and weather economic downturns. With falling crop prices, rising costs, and uncertain labor availability, many small farms are nearing a breaking point. The result? More family farms are selling their land and leaving the industry. Once a symbol of American independence and hard work, small farms are disappearing at an alarming rate. If this trend continues, American farming's future could look very different, dominated by a few megacorporations controlling the entire food supply. The looming threat of climate change beyond economics and politics, one force may impact farming more than any other: climate change. Farmers are experiencing more frequent and severe extreme weather events, droughts, floods, hurricanes, and wildfires, making it harder to maintain stable crop yields. For example, historic droughts in the Midwest have left millions of acres dry and unproductive, forcing farmers to abandon crops or rely on costly irrigation systems. In California, wildfires have destroyed farms and vineyards, while floods in the South have wiped out entire growing seasons. It's not just the weather. The challenges facing farmers go far beyond just extreme weather events. Warmer temperatures brought on by climate change have created ideal conditions for pests and plant diseases to thrive and spread into new regions that were previously unaffected. This expansion forces farmers to spend significantly more on pesticides, fungicides, and other crop protection measures to safeguard their yields. These additional expenses eat into already thin profit margins, making it harder for farmers to stay afloat. Farmers are doing what they can to adapt to this new reality. Some are turning to drought-resistant and pest-resistant crop varieties developed through advanced breeding techniques or biotechnology. Others are adopting precision farming technologies, such as soil moisture sensors, drones, and AI-driven irrigation management systems that help optimize water and fertilizer use, reduce waste, and increase crop resilience. However, adaptation is not easy or cheap, and the harsh truth remains. Climate change is making farming riskier, more unpredictable, and more expensive. John Deere. Challenge and opportunity for companies like John Deere. Climate change presents both a challenge and a potential opportunity. Recognizing the growing urgency, John Deere has been channeling billions into developing climate-friendly technologies aimed at helping farmers mitigate environmental impacts and improve efficiency. This includes electric tractors that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, automated irrigation systems that conserve water, and AI-powered tools that help farmers monitor crop health in real time. Yet, the question remains, will farmers, especially small and medium-sized operations already squeezed by falling prices and rising costs, be able to afford these cutting-edge solutions? Without widespread adoption, the potential benefits of these innovations could be limited, leaving many farmers to struggle with the mounting pressures alone. The rising cost of farming and environmental impact as climate change accelerates. The cost of farming will almost certainly rise. From more frequent droughts to invasive pests, every aspect of crop production faces new threats that demand additional resources and investment.